Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode, TGIM. Thank goodness it's Monday, but today's episode is extra special because the podcast is 5 years old today. 5 years old. Actually, it'll be 5 tomorrow, but this episode is the closest episode to the anniversary date because we put an episode out every Monday. If you've not heard the story of how this podcast started, there are many episodes on that. I'm not going to talk about that today, but I'm just so blessed and grateful that 5 years ago, I took a chance on myself. Before My Aligned Purpose was even a business, before Kayla and I were even supporting one another, I had a dream to have a microphone in front of me, to be able to have really inspiring conversations with people that I meet from around the world, and also to show up and hit record and share any wisdom or information or lessons that I also have. And this podcast was born out of doing the artist way, journaling every day, trying to get clear on what message I wanted to put out into the world and like why and how. And I didn't know anybody with a podcast. I knew famous people with podcasts, but I didn't know anyone that I could turn to and say, hey, how did you start your podcast? And I'm so grateful that over the years, everything I've learned, I've never gatekept. I've shared, we have Podcasting 101, which supports people to start, grow, and market their podcast. And we've had, I don't even know how many people purchase that course and start their podcast or learn how to market their podcast, learn how to monetize their podcast. I'm so grateful that everything I've learned, the lessons along the way, what works, what doesn't work, that I've been able to share with so many of you. And I'm just taking a moment to really celebrate and savor that I had this dream and I went after it. I had this dream and I asked the questions and I pulled the late nights and I did whatever it took to start this podcast and get it up and off of the ground. When I first started this podcast, I didn't have this fancy Shure microphone. I didn't have my background as our logo there on the wall. I didn't even have a home office. AirPods were not a thing when I started the podcast. Isn't that crazy? Kayla and I were chatting about that. I was like, I have to confirm that, but we were both pretty sure that AirPods weren't a thing in March of 2020. And if they were, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think like they just came out around the same time. I certainly didn't have them. I would take my laptop, not this one because this is a newer one, but I would take the laptop I had at the time and I would go sit in my little Toyota Yaris hatchback that I had, and I would sit in my driveway, and it was March and it was chilly and the pandemic had just started the week I put my podcast out, and I'd go out my winter jacket with a blanket and I would bundle up and I would put in headphones to my laptop and I would just start talking. I think the very first podcast I ever recorded is like how to have a morning routine. And the editing process back then is terrible. Please don't listen to our early podcast. Just dive in the last couple of years, but you don't need to go back to episode 1. And I've had so much fun learning over the years. I found Descript, which is the editing tool that we use for our podcast. I have been connected with the most incredible people. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. And having a podcast has completely changed the game for our business. In 2025, the theme of Aligned CEO Method, our year-long mastermind, is the year of becoming well-known. And we asked everyone who was with us in January, people join us all the time. You're welcome to join us today if you'd like. But we set the theme in January of 2025 that this is going to be the year of becoming well-known. And what we mean by that is having a way to be omnipresent, having a way that you can position yourself as the expert in your industry, as a thought leader in your industry. And there's pretty much 2 powerful ways to do that. The first one is to have a podcast. The second one is to write a book. You can record a podcast, put it up on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, all of those sorts of things, and then go about your day. When you have somebody that comes to you and they work their way through your funnel and they're not ready to purchase yet, you can still serve them and give to them by having a podcast. Having a podcast, I believe, is such an incredible outlet for business owners. It's such a great way to build know, love, trust. It's such a great way to create a community and create culture. I don't know how many people we have that tune into hundreds, but I don't know the exact number, hundreds of people that tune into TGIM and Biz Besties every single week. It's a way that we get to connect with all of you. And then you're in the DMs telling us what you're doing from the episode based off of the homework we give you or what we're talking about, the recommendations that we provide. And I just think that's so cool. And so I just want to celebrate myself for starting this. And I want to celebrate all of you who listen and those of you who share this podcast. And cheers to that. Cheers. I've got my favorite mug. Oh, you can't really see it. It's still quite steamy. But this mug says, I'm a master attractor on one side. And then on the other, it says, I attract the people, places, experiences, and things that I desire. And if you're new here, that is a mantra that I created in 2018 for myself. Manifested 4 paid for trips that year, and then have been saying this to myself basically every day since. And we've got merch that says I am a master attractor and sweaters and mugs, and it's become a cult thing here at My Aligned Purpose. And the idea is really that you can create the reality that you desire. You can attract those people, those places, those experiences, those things that you really want. I share with you how weekly on this episode on TGIM. So we're going to get into it. I want to share 5 key things that I've loved/learned over the last 5 years of being your host here on My Aligned Purpose podcast. My hope is that whether you're a longtime listener or you're brand new, you're going to be able to walk away being inspired to build something of your own. When I started this, I had a lot of uncertainty. I had a lot of, what the heck am I doing? But I also had a lot of courage, and I also had a lot of determination. And so my intention is to fuel you and breathe that belief into you as well during today's show. So let's dive into the very first thing that I have learned over the last 5 years of creating My Aligned Purpose podcast. I have learned that when you tell people you will be somewhere for them, you will show up and do something. I have learned that to build community, you need to be reliable. You need to be there for people when you say you're going to be there. So when I think back to starting this show, we didn't have Biz Besties until 2023. And 2022. I always keep forgetting if it's been 2 years or 3 years of doing Biz Besties. But however, My Aligned Purpose podcast has been around for 5 years, and TGIM has always been a segment. And what I've learned is that to create a following, like those of you who are loyal listeners, I have to show up when I say I'm going to show up, and I have to be consistent with that, come hell or high water. There is no saying that you will get an episode every single Monday, every single Thursday, and then not doing that. Not allowing any excuses to get in the way. Have there been times when I've recorded a podcast episode on Sunday pretty close to midnight, then have to go through and do all of the editing myself and the formatting and get the thumbnail ready and the descriptions and get it all up and ready to go for 3 a.m. Atlantic Standard Time? Yeah, absolutely. I have absolutely had to pull some late nights and some long hours of doing the editing myself and recording from places that weren't my home studio or weren't ideal. But I would rather choose that hard over disappointing you, over saying that I'm going to do one thing and then doing another. Integrity to me is doing what you say you're going to do. In order to create a loyal community, you have to create a consistent routine and schedule for people to know where to show up, when to show up, and what to expect. Kayla and I used to talk about this in the past, and it was like the Oprah effect. We learned early on from somebody else. I honestly can't remember where we heard this from, or maybe it was just our own observation. I don't know, but I'm pretty sure we learned it from a podcast or something. We all know raving Oprah fans, probably your mom or your aunt or your sister, or maybe you, depending on your age. Maybe you were the loyal Oprah listener. I know I loved watching Oprah. And when I was a really little kid, I knew how much my mom loved Oprah. I wrote Oprah a letter and asked if she could put my mom on the show or if we could have tickets to the show or something like that. I never heard back, but nonetheless, I still loved Oprah and still do love Oprah. Oprah showed up for North America. She showed up every day at 4 p.m. The Harpo Network began in 1986, the year I was born, and it went until 2011. She built a cult following of raving fans. North Americans tuned in at 4 p.m. Then, in 2011, Oprah switched from Harpo to own the Oprah Winfrey Network. And what ended up happening was that shift in production company shifted the time in which the show was aired, and listenership fell off drastically. Now, did listenership fall off drastically because Oprah became a different person when she switched networks? No. The listenership fell off drastically because people were trained, and I use air quotes to say that, trained, I can't think of a better word, but trained to go to their network at their time and watch the Oprah show, and now it was different. And when you switch things up on people, they have to have time to adjust themselves. They have to adjust their own schedule, their own calendar. We have found from the beginning that just allowing people to know that they can expect a mindset episode, a mindset / manifestation episode every single Monday on the podcast, and then a behind the scenes / business conversation with myself and Kayla every single Thursday on Biz Besties. There's no confusion there. There is any single person who is a loyal listener to our podcast would be able to tell you TGIM comes on Monday and Biz Besties comes on Thursday, and they're released at 3 a.m. Atlantic Standard Time so that it is 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. We've got listeners all across North America. No one is confused on that. And we've never missed an episode because one time, the Biz Besties episode was accidentally scheduled for 3 p.m. instead of 3 a.m. And the slew of messages that we got of, hey, what's up? There's no Biz Besties this morning. And we were like, what? That's recorded. It is edited. It is produced. It's ready to go. It was toggled on. It's scheduled. And then we went and looked and we were like, oh, shoot. We accidentally clicked PM instead of AM. So in that moment, we turned it on. I believe it was about 8:30 in the morning. By the time we caught it, it was 8:30 a.m., so a few hours after it was typically released. And that one show had overall lower listenership than any of our other episodes. Was it because what we said on there wasn't valuable? No. We messed people up by accident by making the mistake and not having the show ready to go, because when people subscribe to podcasts, they get the notification. I've been saying the show is released at 3 a.m. Atlantic Standard Time. I meant to say 3 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 7 a.m. Atlantic Standard Time, because they're 4 hours ahead. So we have trained people across the country, across the nation, to expect the show to be on and ready to go for their drive to work, while they get ready and do their hair, while they make their breakfast. People love consistency. And who am I to tell people they can expect this show, and especially 5 years in, and then stop doing that? We just wouldn't. There have been times when Kayla and I have been so exhausted, literally burn the candle at both ends, maybe out of our own home environments, and then realize, oh my gosh, we don't have a Biz Besties episode ready to go. And we always make it happen. We always make it happen. We're not going to let our listeners down. So the number one lesson that I've learned over the years is that if you want to build culture with your people, you want to build community, you want to build a loyal following, you want to build a reputation, you've got to do what you say you're going to do. And you've got to show up when you say you're going to show up. And you've got to be consistent, and you've got to be consistent with a frequency. People will say, I'm going to consistently put out a podcast. And it's okay. What does that mean? Are you consistently once a month, once every 2 months, once a quarter, once a day? What is your frequency? We are consistently putting out a podcast every Monday, every Thursday, and sometimes when we have a very special guest, we'll do an episode with them, and that will be released on a Friday. I can't stress this enough for every single business owner listening. Where are you training your audience to expect to find you, to learn from you, to know about you? And are you building that consistency and that routine not only into your schedule, but into theirs? We send an email every Monday and Thursday that reminds our listeners that the show is live. There are all these little above and beyond experiences that you can create for your community that will set everyone up for success. So I want to hear from you if this first lesson has resonated with you. Are you thinking about creating a podcast or YouTube channel or an Instagram live series, writing a blog, or going live and doing that on a consistent schedule? One last thing I want to say about this is when you feel like you're coming up against obstacles, consistency will always put magic in front of those obstacles. Just continue to be consistent and the obstacles will not feel like obstacles anymore. My second lesson is a really fun one, and it's on the theme of Nike's slogan, just do it. My just do it attitude in terms of reaching out and asking dream people to be on the podcast has never failed me. When I think back to the very first year going so outside of my comfort zone and writing Dr. Terri Cole and asking her to be a guest on the podcast after she had just written a New York Times bestseller, host of a top charting podcast, and has a raving, loyal following. I was like, I read her book. It changed my life. It helped me end a friendship that wasn't feeling aligned anymore. And I was just honest with her. I started to build connection with her in the DMs by sending voice notes, thanking her for the scripts at the back of the book, tagging her in reading the book, just really showing her that her work had moved me. So when it came time to use my just do it attitude and just do it and ask her to be a guest on the show, she said yes. And I couldn't believe it. That was my first celebrity experience of having somebody who I looked up to as an author, as a speaker, as a podcast host, a psychotherapist out in New York. Like, Terri Cole is a big deal. And to have her say yes, that just affirmed for me that when there is somebody I want to have on this show, just do it and ask them. When I was really into all of Drew Manning's content and loving what he was doing, his whole fit to fat to fit movement, seeing him on Dr. Oz, hearing about his books, seeing him on other people's podcasts, I was like, I want this man on our show. Again, built connection with him in the DMs, asked him to be on the show. He said yes. When I think about somebody like Colleen Nichols, who is mega influencer, also just wrote a best-selling book, is a podcast host, the creator of Digital Sales Growth Community. When I think about how I got Colleen to say yes and come on the show, which is still one of our top most listened to episodes of all time, of all 5 years, it's because I built a connection with her. Over the years, I have had some incredible guests on the show, guests that have taken listenership from a few hundred to a few thousand per episode. The power of people sharing that they're on the show has really allowed more and more listeners to come to us. And most recently, I reached out to Francesca Simpa. I saw her on my coach, Lori Harder's podcast. I did some research on her. I got some of her programs on the back end. I was like, I love the work that you're doing. She's combined breathwork and hypnotherapy to create a hypno breathwork certification. And she's doing all this work with celebrities. I was like, I want to have you on the show. I loved your episode with Lori. Her and I got chatting back and forth. I've got her lined up to come on in April. So many of our new friends from our mastermind want to be on the show, and I've got a lot of them booked in. All of this has been made possible because I have a just do it attitude. Just send the message. Just let them know that you're inspired by their work. Just send them the link. Just do it. The worst that can happen is they say no, or they ghost you or don't respond. And then you're no further behind than if you didn't ask them in the first place. So that is one of my second biggest lessons in the last 5 years, is apply a just do it attitude. I want you to think right now about somebody that you want to have on your show, or write the foreword of your book, or you want to go on Instagram Live with them, or you want to host an event and do something with them. I want you to think of somebody that feels a little bit like, ooh, what if they say no? Or what if they don't get back to me? That you, when you ask them, it comes from a place of drawing courage from within yourself. And I want you to just do it and get out there and ask them. Now, number 3 might surprise you because I haven't talked about this much. I don't talk about it too much, especially outwardly, maybe with inside of our community or people inside of Podcasting 101. But I have loved the sales that we've been able to generate inside of My Aligned Purpose because of having this podcast. From having this podcast, we have had people reach out to us, apply to be a part of Aligned CEO Method. We see on their form when it says, how did you hear about us? They'll say the podcast. I'll reach out to Kayla and say, do you know this person? She'll say, no. Do you know this person? I'm like, no. We will either have a quick call with them or go back and forth in the DMs, and they will sign up to our 5-figure program, us having never known them, never heard about them, but they have been following along and feel like they know, love, and trust us enough to invest 5 figures to work with us because of this podcast, because on this podcast, we give you the opportunity to get to know who we really are. When we have run smaller programs like Cash Flow, Align Business School, Manifesting Money Masterclass, Millionaire Mindset, when we have run any of our smaller price point programs, we have had so many people come to us. And again, when they sign up to the program, we always find out from people, where'd you come from? How'd you hear about us? Did somebody refer you? How do you know about our work? And when people say the podcast, I'm always blown away. We can look back and see that we have generated multiple 5 figures, probably not at the 6-figure mark yet, of revenue in our company because of the podcast, sales because of the podcast. Now, in Canada, we can't monetize our podcast. We don't have that option. We can't turn it on, just like we can't monetize TikTok. And there's a lot of rules and regulations that I don't vibe with. And so when I talk to other Canadians about how to monetize your podcast, I talk about how to be really strategic about inviting your audience into what it is that you're doing through your episodes, through your shows, not just with the link in your show notes, like actually talking about the work that you do and how people can opt in and join you. So one of the lessons or the things that I'm celebrating over the last 5 years that I don't really talk about too much is the money we've been able to make because of this show. It essentially costs me nothing but my time to show up and film these episodes. Yes, a couple of years ago, we made an investment in some nice microphones, investments in some good lighting. I've got this nice home office that I enjoy being in. But outside of that, running this podcast doesn't necessarily cost me money. So when I see somebody sign up to a program that we're running that costs money, and I always ask, how did you hear about us if I don't know them yet? And they say the podcast, I don't think it's ever going to get old that I'm so grateful for this show and for showing up and being consistent and providing value and education and to all of you and creating connection. That's what this is really all about. So the fourth thing I want to talk about is like the third thing. It's a celebration. So the first and second thing are both lessons that I've learned from doing this podcast. The third and fourth thing are both celebrations. This fourth thing that I want to celebrate about the 4 years of doing the podcast is the deep, incredible connections I've been able to build because of doing the show, whether it's been guests on the show, whether it's been hearing from those of you in the DMs who are loyal listeners and reach out to me and tell me how much the show changes your life or how listening to the show has really got you thinking differently or motivated to grow your business or exit your 9-to-5. Or we've got a lot of teachers who listen because I know a lot of you know I was a teacher and you're inspired by that story and I'm just waiting for you to take that leap as well. The connections, absolutely unbelievable. I'm at a point now in business and especially in this podcast where I'm really selective about who comes on the show, incredibly selective. And we get pitched all day, every day. Thank you, Tanner, for managing our email inbox. Tanner's our assistant. I always tell her, please decline the podcast episodes after doing like a quick bit of research. If somebody pitching me has a podcast of their own and I look it up on Listen Notes, which is you can go search anybody's podcast on Listen Notes, and I see that they've got a top rated podcast, then I might be interested in doing a podcast exchange or when I meet friends, like the friends who are in our masterminds, and I know they're taking their business seriously, and I know that I can support their business and give value to our audience by having them on the show, then absolutely. But outside of that, unless it's going to be a really equal energetic exchange of guesting on each other's show, or it's somebody that I know personally and I've built a relationship with, at this point in time, my time is really valuable and I don't want to have tons of guests on the show and dilute the messaging for the audience and dilute the value. I know what I bring to the table is value packed, and I know what Kayla and I bring to the table is value packed. impact. And so it's really important to me that the person that is a guest on the show is also going to leave the audience with tons of value. Otherwise, I don't want it. And so it's been really cool. It's two-part. I'm celebrating the amazing connections I've been able to build because of this podcast, but also the grounded confidence to be able to say, I just don't want everybody and anybody on the show. And we turn down upwards of 20 to 30 guests a week. I know it's really insane. I think because there's so many podcasting pitching agencies out there, that's why we get pitched so much. And I do believe in giving an underdog a chance for sure. It's just not where I'm at in the stage in business. And I feel really grateful to be able to have a show that you can go put My Line Purpose into listen notes. You can see we're in the top 2%. You can see that our listen rate is there. You can see that our show is charting just behind some other really incredible shows. And I'm proud of that. And again, I want to keep the integrity of the show high. I want to keep the value to all of you really high. I want to continue to keep the connections really true and really solid. I'm so grateful for all of the friends and the connections this show has brought me, as well as the boundaries it's allowed me to create. And last, but certainly not least, the fifth thing that I want to share with all of you as we are here 445 episodes in, it almost makes me feel a little bit emotional, is I want you to know that what you desire is available too. I wanted this so badly, and I continue to want this so badly. This is my aligned purpose. This podcast is me being aligned with my purpose. When I think about little Nicole, all she wanted was get her on a stage and give her a microphone. When I think about teenage Nicole, it was like, I got 100% in drama. When I think about young adult Nicole, I love to be the life of the party. This is where I shine. This is what I love. I love talking. I love giving inspirational value to people. I love educating. I love taking complex ideas and simplifying them so that you can learn something new and be inspired. I love connecting and being relatable to so many, and also not being relatable to everyone, ruffling the feathers here and there when need be. I am aligned with my purpose. And our company is named My Line Purpose because the podcast was named My Line Purpose. The podcast was the gateway into the life I live right now. And this name did not come to me in a blink of a moment. This name came to me through weeks of journaling, weeks of going for walks and asking my higher self, my connection to source, to spirit. I really want to have a body of work that exists, that represents who I am and what I care about and what I stand for. And I want the name to represent that. So it couldn't just be any name. And finally, I remember where I was at when I was on my walk, the name dropped into me. And it was my aligned purpose, not your aligned purpose, not the aligned purpose. It was my aligned purpose. And I have my own definition of what alignment means, and it has to do with the chakra system, and it dates back to a time in 2016 that is really impactful in my life, of when I felt that all of my energy centers came online and got in alignment. And then purpose. I want to live on purpose. I want to live in purpose. I understand what my purpose is. And so to be aligned with my purpose is really important to me. And I'm really passionate about it. And I'm really passionate about helping every single person that comes to me, whether you are a listener of this episode, or you join us inside of Aligned CEO Method, or you follow along on social media, or you open up our emails, or you come to our events. My gift in this world is to help you also align with your purpose, so you can feel like my aligned purpose is clear. And so what I've learned over the 5 years of having this show is, do not doubt yourself. Do not discount yourself. Do not ever stop believing in yourself. Do not ever give up on yourself. Set a dream, put it in motion, believe in yourself, make a decision that you're going to continue to go after it, and set a damn schedule so people know where to find you and when to find you. And then be so damn persistent. Just keep going. Okay. So There's a reflection of 5 years of My Aligned Purpose podcast. I want to share with all of you who are listening some lessons that I've learned, some things that I'm celebrating, and leaving you with a little bit of inspiration. Whether you are a longtime listener or this is your very first time tuning in, I want you to hear this. You have something valuable to create, and you have a purpose that is uniquely yours. And starting something is incredibly scary, and continuing on with it through the hard days, even scarier. Even when it feels like no one's listening, no one's buying, what am I doing this all for? I want you to remember that consistency compounds. Small actions taken regularly with your purpose will create something so big and so magical over time. 5 years ago, this podcast was just an idea. It was just an idea, a hope. It was floating around in the wind. It was a possibility. And today it's a community. It's a resource. It's a weekly connection that spans the globe. So I want you to ask yourself, what could your idea become in 5 years from now? Time's passing anyway. Your time is passing anyway. What idea do you have right now that if you took action on it every week, every day, every week, what could that be in 5 years? And I don't want you to wait for perfect conditions. Remember, I started in my Toyota Yaris with no microphone, with my wired headphones, because I don't think AirPods were a thing yet. I didn't have a website to send anybody to. I didn't have anything for sale. I started this podcast because I wanted to have an outlet to pursue my passion. I don't want you to wait until you feel ready, because you're never going to feel ready. I want you to start where you are. I want you to start where you are with what you have and to be consistent and stay aligned with your purpose. And then watch as something so beautiful unfolds. Thank you from the very, very bottom of my heart for listening to the show, whether today was your very first episode or you've been tuning in with us for 5 years and 445 episodes. I so appreciate you being here. I wanted to share a fun little podcast birthday giveaway that we're doing. And you could win a free manifestation mindset call with me. And the way that you're going to be entered into the draw is by heading to Apple Podcasts. You're going to head to Apple Podcasts. You're going to search My Aligned Purpose Podcast. You're going to scroll to the bottom where it says leave a review. You're going to leave a review with your name. Click those 5 stars. Say something you've loved about this episode or the show or why you're a listener. Even if you've left a review before, this is a birthday giveaway and it would mean so much to me. It would mean more than you could even know. If you wanted to celebrate My Aligned Purpose birthday, if you wanted to gift My Aligned Purpose podcast something, it would be that review. And we are going to draw for the winner on April 3rd. So stay tuned. It will take a couple of days for your review to show up. So don't fret if you go and leave your review and then you go back to check and it's not there. It does take about 48 hours for reviews to show up, but you do have to leave your name. Otherwise, we might not know it's you and then won't be able to enter you into the draw. I never, ever do one-off coaching calls. It doesn't happen. So this is a really special gift from me to you. I would love to support you in building out your big dreams and manifesting whatever it is that you desire, the people, places, experiences, and things. I want to be able to support you to do that. So we're going to enter your name into a draw. For those of you who head on over again to Apple Podcasts, you can do it on your phone or on your desktop. Scroll to the bottom, leave a review, let us know who you are, click those 5 stars. And again, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for being here, for listening to this episode, for being a loyal listener. And let me know, what is the dream that you are pursuing today and setting a goal for 5 years from now, knowing that 5 years from now, that dream can be something so big. If you had have told me 5 years ago, I would have a podcast that generates multiple 5 figures of revenue. I get to speak to incredible people from around the world, that it is the number one outlet for me in my business. If you were to tell me that 5 years ago, I would say, yeah, duh, I'm a master manifester. No, I'm just joking. But I would be like wowed at myself for continuing to keep going. And so just know that anything is possible. I say it in the intro of the show. If I can make my dream of becoming a chart-topping podcaster a reality, then you can make your dream come true too. Maybe I can help you a little bit with a manifesting call. Okay, happy Monday, everyone.